WDON is proud to present our latest podcast, The Colors of Sound. Our mission is to create a safe space for community members from around the world to share their personal stories. Listen on all streaming platforms or on our podcast station, WDON1204.com. The Colors of Sound podcast. Discover how much we have in common. Welcome, everybody. My name is Timothy Stone Dancer Coleman. This is the Colors of Sound podcast. Today, I'm so excited to have my friend, Adrian Edward with us. He is the CEO, founder of Color Me Mozart. We had the privilege of working together in New York City public school system for a few years, where he served communities all over the city. But for me specifically, we were working together in the South Bronx.
I'm Esther Berman. I'm a licensed behavior analyst. I work with all children, K through adulthood, and we've been using Color Me Mozart for over a year now. Lucas is really enjoying music and understanding new concepts and learning music earlier on. He's gonna excel by the time he's like 15, 16 years old and even higher. But I've just noticed, like in school, we just had his parent-teacher conference, and she told me how well versed he is in communicating and just his language. And you just open up the book and follow it along, and you're able to apply it in real life on a piano or a xylophone. So it is really easy. And if you don't know, what I love most is that their website is so easy to navigate, and you can print stuff off and apply it in your own environment. So it's really, really great.
Please help me in welcoming Adrian Edward to the Colors of Sound podcast. Before Color Me Mozart, what were you doing, and what kind of led you up to the point of developing your company?
Absolutely. Yeah. So interestingly enough, I'd love to sit here and say, oh, this has been a dream of mine, for the past 40 years. It wasn't, right? But life has an amazing way of kind of taking twists and turns that like change us forever. And music was one of those things. I didn't grow up in a musical family. My dad was a painter, but I never tried music. And I tried my first class in high school, and it was love at first note. As soon as I saw piano music and I saw piano, I'm like, I don't know why. I had been flaky about everything in life up until that point, and then music just made sense to me, and I loved it. But I have always been a fan of learning, different approaches to education. I was a kid that learned differently. I know if it was in today's years, if I was a kid now, I definitely would have been diagnosed with some type of attention deficit disorder, stuff like that. So the one way of learning never worked for me. So I always looked for different ways. So I knew that I wanted something in the future. Once I started learning music, or even any part of education, I really appreciated those people that search for different methods of education. So throughout the years, it just kind of I started teaching privately, and I had my own way of teaching, and it came from such a healthy place because I genuinely loved music, and I loved when my students would get that aha moment. I love helping people fall in love with music, fall in love with just art and creativity and using their creativity and things like that. And it wasn't until I worked, you mentioned it for my bio, had the pleasure of working at a preschool as a music therapist, and there just wasn't any great curriculum that I needed to use. So I'm like, you know what? I'll do it myself.
That's
and
right.
It was from there that it kind of just birthed to what it is today. And I could never be more grateful for those kids. I always say it, and not to sound corny, but they changed my life way more than I hope I changed them, in the most positive way. But they really just redirected my focus of like what it means to offer somebody the joy of something that perhaps wouldn't otherwise have the opportunity. That's when my mind exploded.
The first thing is, with the ADHD, I think I developed that in my adulthood. Like I'm bouncing around to like all these different things. So I definitely can feel you on that. There are a lot of companies and organizations, and this, that go into schools, and it's like, this is our box. This is what we've created. Accept it as it is. We don't modify it. Like it's going to be what it's going to be.
Right.
And, kids are humans too. And everything doesn't work the same for every human being. And so what I love with Color Me Mozart is that even as I watched you in the classroom and I watched video of what you guys were doing with the kids, a lot of it during COVID, online hybrid kind of stuff. what I loved was that you're always in a mode to adapt to the moment. I follow you on LinkedIn, which I hope a lot of folks, take a minute to tap into what you're posting and what you're doing on LinkedIn. It's really phenomenal. But what is kind of driving you forward at this point?
We're using music as a tool for non-musical goals. And that already was like, boom, right? That changed everything. So this goes back to, let's say, sports, right? Sports are great, right? But it's really not every kid's going to be the next, Tom Brady or, and I don't even know enough about Messi, right? I'm a big soccer fan, right? So, but what do we learn from sports? Sportsmanship, team, leadership, consistency, dedication, passion, all these things. That's really the lesson. That's what I realized what music did for me. Is it really about that one song, about playing Mozart or Beethoven? It doesn't matter. What we really want is to get all those non-musical benefits. And so my thinking always is we need to get kids into learning the language of music in the same way they learn at home, whether it's English, Russian, Chinese, Spanish. I grew up in a two language household. The benefits, the cognitive benefits that come from that, the confidence, the socialization, the turn taking, the finding gross motor skills, all these other things. How we get there doesn't really matter. I can use Let It Be by the Beatles, or I can use Mozart piano concerto. It doesn't make a difference. The kid's not going to know the difference, but the goal is exactly the same. In our lessons, we always encourage, hey, let's listen to salsa, to tango, to hip hop, to bluegrass, to jazz, to fusion. What do you like the best? That's where we want to get to. Now you create your own. You use your creative powers to not just sit there and receive. We want kids to be active. I've been reading so many fascinating neurological studies. When a child actively participates in music, the amount of his mind that lights up in those scans is mind boggling. So if I wasn't even convinced enough before, now science backs it up that just singing along is not enough. Participating is what changes a kid's life.
A lot of what we see is, a very traditional, sterile, I'm standing in front of the class. This is what I've got to teach. You need to learn it. Here's a test. Why did you do so bad? Right. Like, and it's all
That's
the
right.
pressure's on the kid.
Yeah.
Right. So then, now it's very like hands-on. I can participate. I can feel confident in what I'm doing. What I love about one of the things that you said about Color Me Mozart is, and kind of your path, is that you are helping teach for things even outside of music. You're helping teach for life,
Right.
right? And developing these skills that young people can use for life. But I want to also tap in for a quick second, because you say that you work with a lot of private students. What's the age range of Color Me Mozart? Like, what is the age range of folks that can receive the information the way that you're teaching it?
Yeah, so when you mentioned in my bio, and I still do. I love teaching privately. That ranges everything from I'll have a 4-year-old doing some drums to one of the professors from collegiate. He does rock and roll guitar. He's a big Springsteen fan and always wanted to play. So I just love giving people that access, right? But when it comes to Color Me Mozart, our focus was early development. So it's really geared towards the preschooler, kindergartner, and first grade in mind. We want to catch those early years. And I should explain this detail for those listening. What we actually do is empower teachers and parents to do this. This isn't a music teacher thing. You do not need a music degree or to be music knowledgeable. We wanted to make this so basic in the same way that no teacher or parent would ever fear teaching their kids shapes and colors and letters. We sit there and we're like, okay, let's sound it out. Let's say A, let's say B. What color is that? What shape is that? That's how far we've broken it down. And we're really empowering the teachers and the parents to be the ones that offer it to their kids. We wanted to take ourselves out of the equation instead of it being great. Now I need that specialized teacher to come in, that specialized, not every family could afford private lessons. It'd be wonderful, but that's not how life works, but this way, the same way a child learns their native language or even a second language, that's what we wanted to do. But the program is specifically, I would say, ages 4 to 6, but those grades in mind, preschool, kindergarten, and first grade.
So talk to me because you just dropped a golden nugget and I don't want people to miss it, right? You just said that even parents who might be non-musical in a traditional sense, right? I'm adding that part, of course, but for parents being able to actually do this at home and work with their children, like what does that look like? What does that feel like?
Yeah, so that's again, maybe boiling it down to a simple explanation of the same way a parent would read their child a story at night, right? No parent would think twice. Well, I don't have a degree in literature. I can't read a
Oh, that's a
bedtime
good
book to my
analogy. Yes.
we don't talk that way. But for
Right.
some reason, I don't know why. I love to know. Maybe one day I'll research this. I don't know why we've complicated the explanation of, and we're talking foundational music, right? We're not
Right.
talking this child's going to come out of kindergarten playing a Rachmaninoff concerto in Carnegie Hall. That's not what we're
Right.
talking about, right?
Right.
But in this case, it's as simple as parents sit down and they learn together with their child. They'll watch a video together, they'll play on their
Hmm.
instrument, which in our case includes a xylophone or a color coded keyboard. And in the same way that a 3, 4 year old can pick it up, that parent can also follow along and guide them through it and practice them through it. And inadvertently, which was my little sneaky plan along the way, was parents and teachers don't know they're learning music, and then they wake up one day and they're like, wait a minute, now I know 40 instruments from the orchestra. Now I know how to read middle C to high C. I know what the treble clef is. I know what violins are supposed to sound like. I know what professional music notation looks like. That was our goal, where you're learning without knowing that you're learning.
What's the next level that you're taking it to, and what are those like things that might be on your private little notebook checklist, right? You're like, oh, one day I'm going to be able to do this, right? Like what's that next level?
Yeah, so we have, let's say, actual products, right? Like picture board book coming out. We just released a coloring book, our level 4 workbook, all those practical things, a teacher certification, which was really important to make sure teachers are trained correctly. But at the heart of it, really where all the energy is going, is making sure that the schools and parents, for that matter, homeschoolers and parents that do this at home with their kids, that they're successful, like going above and beyond on that, just feeling that they're part of something, not just, oh, we got something. Great, I bought an exercise machine and it's sitting there. What do I do now? If they do hit a stumbling block, we're there to explain it. Every other video has a musician from around the world. So if we're teaching about
Mm,
the harp, we have this wonderful harpist from Hong Kong that just explains the harp. We have a trumpet player from Italy that does
that's
that.
amazing.
So they get to see music is a world thing that transcends all cultures, all ages, everything. The rhythms that we hear between 6 months and 12 months, yes, when we're an infant, are the rhythms we feel most comfortable with for the rest of our lives, which blew my mind. And then I started thinking, right? Full disclosure here, I am from Argentina, but I do lack some Latin rhythms inside me because I didn't grow up with them. We didn't grow up with them. So my wife is over there dancing salsa like she learned it all her life. And
Yeah.
I'm over there with 2 left feet because I didn't listen to that. So I tell parents all the time, play music in the house, even if it's
That's right.
not your style. Try different things because kids are a sponge and they absorb it. So
That's so funny because we grew up like in my family, we grew up on jazz and gospel music, right?
right.
So there wasn't a whole lot of break dancing and whatever, but I've got a killer like step touch. You know what I'm saying? Like this is my choir move is like the best I got, you know? Between 6 and 12 months. That's really amazing. That's amazing.
Right. Again, just making teachers and parents aware of the value that this has beyond the music and the world that it opens. It has nothing to do with them becoming professional musicians. It's about exposing them to a completely new way of communicating with the world around them that otherwise they wouldn't have.
I love it. I love it. You know, in school, I remember when I made it to middle school, and I remember when kind of all the bullying set in and like all the different, changes of life in your body and this is, everything around you. It wasn't until I got into choir to the chorus that I actually started to feel confident about myself and confident about just my outlook. I wasn't a sports person, and I
Right.
wasn't like a brainiac, so it was like, okay, where do I really fit in? And once I
Hmm.
got locked into music, the confidence carried over to other subject areas, right?
Right.
And so I can only imagine when you're exposing youth at such a young age to Color Me Mozart and the program and the theory behind the accessibility of your program, um, what they'll go on to do even beyond that. And again, I get it. The goal isn't that every kid is going to become the next, Mozart or Beethoven or
Right.
whatever, but you never know. How are you helping grow this other than the direct work in the classroom? And of course, as we said before, with parents who kind of like learn the process and are able to do this with their students, with their
Right.
children.
No, yeah, absolutely. Well, Argentina. I would love to get it to Argentina, but right now it's been kind of fascinating. The past few years, we had a couple of like great surprises because there was a music teacher in England that fell in love with the program. They were using another program, and she said we want to do it here with my husband, and
Mhm.
so she's opened up kind of our wing there in Bristol, UK, and it's just been fascinating because again, just one of us, right? Like that, the passion behind just
Yeah.
sharing with like youth, and she's just like, I don't know, it's just lovely to like see someone that I never would have considered, right? How would I
Right.
reach somebody in England other than maybe through social media, that type of thing?
That's right.
So she has our branch there. Then she started implementing in different preschools there. We have another teacher in Portugal that just applied for a grant with the government to do a program in Portugal. We have
Nice.
Australia. We have Mexico. And so just seeing the fact that everything that we're mentioning now, doesn't just apply to, hey, here in the States or Canada, let's say. The
That's
fact
right.
that everyone, all these people that write in, they tend to have a very similar reaction. Oh
Mhm.
my goodness, this is what we needed. This makes
Yeah.
sense. So it's
Yeah.
kind of more of my way of thinking as a piano teacher. Like, I need a curriculum like this. Like, I would have benefited from this, you know? And I
Yeah.
say that in the teacher certification too. Like, I'm giving you what I wish I had, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
comes
Yeah.
from a place of, I'm trying to solve the problem I had before. I can't do it. I already solved it. So let me solve it for you now. And so that reaction's been wonderful. And so we're doing our best to not only help them, obviously it's hard from perspective of being here in the States,
Mhm.
but it's getting very close. We've been able to ship the program to other countries, and we're hoping by next year, by next summer, because we're doing a few conferences, homeschool conferences, because that's a
Mhm.
big part of like, especially since the pandemic, a
Oh,
lot of parents
yeah.
have opted for homeschool.
Because I know you, I know that even if one kid got it, you would be overjoyed, right?
Correct.
But the
Yeah.
fact that you have this building and growing in an exponential way is so phenomenal to see and watch. And so I pray, much success and blessing upon you and your family in all that you're doing, because you're approaching it with the people in mind, and you're approaching it with an open heart. You're willing to learn, you're willing to develop it and keep it rocking. So I guess as a final thought, um what is the overall takeaway for someone catching this podcast, learning about Color Me Mozart for the first time, hearing everything that we've spoken about? I'm sure many people have multiple takeaways at this point, but from you, what is
Yeah.
that final takeaway that you would say to folks at this point?
I would say whether you fall into the category of being a teacher that teaches young kids or a parent that has young kids in mind, don't underestimate the power that music has to change their lives. And
Yeah.
don't don't listen to what's been told to you that it's complicated or out of reach or not within the possibilities to offer your kids or your students. It absolutely can be,
Hmm.
and it's been complicated for way too long. And
Yeah.
just to let them know that the benefits that it has beyond the music are immeasurable. studied by everything from neuroscientists to your family that will tell you, yes, music is a part of our life, like anecdotal, multi-generational music being passed by. Music
That's right.
has that power to unite. Do not deprive your child or students of that experience. It would be tragic, to say the very least.
Every student, every teacher, the principal, the superintendents, everyone that experienced Color Me Mozart was extremely thrilled by the work and development of things that the kids created on their own. I loved what you said about, getting out of the way and allowing it to take place and watching it grow and watching the classrooms thrive. The best thing I think we could do in certain situations is try and make ourselves obsolete, so
Absolutely.
that people can own the learning and the benefits of that come behind that. So, thank you so much for your approach. Thank you again for joining us.
Share your story on the Colors of Sound podcast. Our mission is to create a safe space for community members from around the world to share their unique stories. Do you have an interesting story to share? Or perhaps a journey of triumph from a challenge that you faced? Do you want the world to know about your talent? Visit our website and complete our guest intake form at WDON1204.com. The Colors of Sound podcast. Discover how much we have in common.